r/homestead, original post by simple_sale 2254. I'm only 20 years of age, but I want to buy land. What do I need to know about buying land before doing so? Comment by H60 Mechanic. If all you can afford is a small plot, start with that. Ideally, you find a plot surrounded by undeveloped land, so if the opportunity comes your way, you can offer to buy more that's surrounding you to fit your needs. Just know the more you own, the more you have to pay in taxes. So if you aren't putting it to use, you'll be paying for taxes, which can be a drain. But God made only so much land. We're all chasing after less and less land. So if you can get some now, you'd likely be better off. Things to consider is if the land is zoned for agriculture or residential/business. If it's zoned for residential or business, it's not a good idea. Residential means someone is planning to turn it into a subdivision, and you're going to have neighbors everywhere. With it will come the nightmare of HOAs. If it's business, you can't live there, and it'll possibly turn into an industrial park. Agricultural land tends to have lower property taxes, and you can live on it and don't always have to be actively engaged in agriculture. Look up your state's geological surveys and see what you're working with on the land. My home state of Kansas has maps of known groundwater for wells. Problem I have is the survey was completed in the 40s, 50s. The groundwater may have dried up or migrated, but it isn't always stationary. I don't know until I finish my well. An active spring or stream would be good to have, or a pond too. Just know that they can all dry up. So don't let everything hinge on a single water source, but don't make it a deal killer if there's only one water source. Kansas has a unique law that you can own your land, but you don't own the mineral rights. Some farmer 75 years ago owned the plot and found oil under his land. He bought for pennies on the dollar the mineral rights, then passed that on to his kids. He sold the old family farm, and anyone who came in later, like yourself, is left out. Just know that you can still buy the mineral rights if they're willing to sell. I don't know what it means if an oil company wants to drill on your land, because they have the right to that oil. They can probably come build a well on your land whether you like it or not. I don't know how this works for other minerals like mining. There are a lot of counties across the country that are passing ordinances that are making it difficult to homestead. A lot of places don't like people living in campers or temporary structures, tiny homes or mobile homes, anything that's not on a permanent foundation. It's believed that it'll lower property values. Just think of rural Arkansas and the Ozarks. Lots of people have mobile homes with broken down vehicles in the yard and junk everywhere. I believe this is the fear. My county sent out a notification someone had plans to do this in my area and gave 30 days to protest. I'm not concerned. We're far enough out, and if they're like most people, they're looking to build when they can afford it while they develop the land in the meantime. You have to consider if the property is in a flood zone or if there are other hazards to consider. Things that will cause your insurance to be sky high, or if for whatever reason you decide to sell, you can be aware of whether there's something that will make it hard to sell. Because life circumstances change and you may need to get out from under the land. The best part about owning land is that because there's only so much to go around, typically this means values tend to go up. So if you buy something now, it's typically not a bad investment. Only other thing is environmental contamination. Soil and water are of primary concern. Is there any kind of industrial operation nearby, like mining or manufacturing, landfills? They can be leaching environmental toxins into the groundwater. This can create problems for you or anyone who wants to buy in the future. It could be a warning sign if the land is abnormally cheap. People aren't always honest, or they simply don't look as thoroughly into things. So I'm dealing with 2 burn pits because they burn trash on my property. I'm concerned what might have leached into the soil or groundwater. Won't know until I clear out the soil and test my water. It can be contaminating the groundwater where other people might be tapped into it. I'm surrounded by Indian reservation. I don't want to find out that contamination negatively affects the cattle operation on the reservation. Extreme stuff, but I'm trying to be proactive. Nothing may happen, but chemical contamination is a real thing. Oftentimes, you can get more for your buck if you buy a house with land on it. I have found that you can buy 10 acres for $100,000 or buy a house with 10 acres for $300,000. At least in Kansas, may not be like that most places, but KS is typically more affordable. Sukutun replied, "This is a wealth of information. Your last advice about buying land with a house is what I'm inclined. Thank you very much for sharing." H60 Mechanic replied, "I tend to be wordy. I'm glad someone found it useful. Thanks." Simple_sale 2254 replied, "This definitely gives me more insight to work with and think about." H60 Mechanic replied with a YouTube link, "This guy speaks gold." H60 Mechanic replied, "A few more comments. A ton of people are telling you to get a good job. I sure hope that's your goal. You can pursue both land and a good career. I'm a bit cynical and hated the fact I went to college when all of my buddies went into the trades. They all have way more land than me. They have 4 to 5 kids and are so much farther along on their homesteads than me. They had the resources to buy houses with tons of land when the market collapsed in 2008. I bought at the peak of the market 10 years after they did. When I was your age, 18 in 2008, I wanted to buy a camper when they were selling for $900 to $1,500 all day, every day. Land was selling as low as $500 to $7,500 an acre in places. I wanted to start a homestead, but college got in the way. I didn't learn any skills in a trade job. I am trying to play catch up. Drinking from a fire hydrant on how to build and do everything. I deployed to Iraq in 2018-19 and came home with about $30,000 in the bank, ready to put a hefty down payment on some land. Problem is, somehow in the year that I was gone, land prices were insane. People were wanting $12,000 to $15,000 for a half-acre plot. 10 acres was $100,000. Oil was cheap. Camper prices went up. Prefab sheds for making a tiny house used to be $5,000 to $6,000. Last I knew, they were like $15,000 to $20,000 depending on size. I was so defeated. So if you think you're going to wait and save up, don't. Just know the risks and be ready for failure because it's going to happen. Life happens while we're off making other plans. You have time to recover in your youth. Just don't neglect what matters in life. Don't wait to get married. Don't neglect putting away for retirement. Don't put too much effort into homesteading. It's hard work and it can still fail you like so many other things in life. The work in homesteading isn't going to let up. You're going to grow old and you're going to slow down. You won't likely going to be able to make the homestead be your retirement plan. You're going to need help as you get older. You're still going to need to buy things. Perfect self-sufficiency is extremely hard to achieve and even harder to maintain. Community is key, but people will fail you. They're people. The only perfection in man is imperfection. In comparison, if I bought my house in 2013 for $130,000, I could have refinanced and gotten a 2% interest rate instead of the 3.3%. Not horrible by any means, and able to pay the house off soon if I paid extra each month. Instead, I bought my house for $225,000 in 2022, almost 75% increase in less than 10 years. Waiting for the market to let up is a joke. More people are leaving the cities than ever, and demand will stay high for rural land. I just hope we don't make the rural areas one giant subdivision. Everyone has their 1 to 3 acre plots. I'm learning in my 30s to be more of a risk taker, but it's a hard process. You're still young enough that you're still more easily able to form new neural pathways. The new ideas and habits form easier. Get you set in before you get set in your ways. Shrike 12 commented, taxes are pretty minimal for rural land, at least where I am at this isn't a factor. I pay $800 a year for my house on 100 acres, and most of that is the house. H60 Mechanic replied, that's awesome. Does that include your home as well? Like I said, ag zoning tends to be the lowest taxes. Ag can be the same as rural depending on where you live. I don't like to think about my property taxes. They keep going up each year. I don't fight it because the county has my house appraised about $50,000 less than what the realtor reports my house is worth. If I protest the increase, I might get screwed by a new appraisal far higher than I want it to be. It's covered in my escrow, and I take it up the rear each month. Shrike 12 commented, well, that includes my house and a really nice shop. That's my all-in real estate tax cost, $857.64 in 2023. I know what you mean about getting wrecked by taxes. I used to own in Kansas City. Holy shit, the taxes. I love where I am at now. H60 Mechanic replied, KC? I'm north of Topeka. Small world. Shrike 12 responds, I am south of Joplin now. H60 Mechanic comments, lower property taxes, I'm sure. That's why my in-laws live south of KC on the on the Missouri side. Complaint number 6835 commented, also note that some properties come with what is called an easement. This is where people or companies have the legal right to access that land for some reason, like a power company maintaining lines or to use your land to access other land. It isn't necessarily a deal breaker, but personally, I'd rather not have people using my land without my permission. H60 Mechanic replied, I was considering buying 7 acres that butted up against my property, but decided not to because there wasn't enough in the budget and there was a cell tower on the property. I didn't have the rights to the lease, and so it was going to be an eyesore and make it hard to sell if I needed to. Back to that idea of having an exit strategy. That cell tower would have likely made the sell of it harder. Turned out that was the property that has the camper on it. They seem okay with having the cell tower on it.